Hi everyone, and welcome to Stars in My Pocket. I'm Anisa, and this is a very special bonus episode, a movie deep dive on Black Panther, which Paroma and I enjoyed so much that we simply couldn't not talk about it. Sadly, our initial recording of the episode disappeared into the ether, and we had to do a second go, which is why we're a bit late, but we hope you enjoy regardless. And on a very exciting note, thank you so much for getting us to 100 subscribers on YouTube. Yay! We're so touched, and we feel so blessed that you all are out there listening to us squee and rant and philosophize about Korean dramas and the occasional, other thing that we love. We love you. Thank you, and enjoy the episode. Yay! Black Panther!
Yay! So, full disclosure, we recorded this whole thing.
Once before, yeah.
Yes, and we were very excited, and then we found out that the recording had not actually come through, so we're doing this again, but we're still very excited.
Yeah, we are. And maybe it's a good thing, because I think in the last recording we were squeeing so much, there was not much critical thinking happening.
This is true, yes.
Okay, you know what? I want to start by asking you how you felt when you first heard that Black Panther was announced. Like, it was going to come out in 2 years. It was in 2016 that I first heard about it. And okay, you tell me first how you felt about it.
Okay, so I think they announced it before Civil War came out. Because Civil War came out, I think, May of 2016, right? So okay. I was not really sure what to think about this because I didn't have any, I've never read the Black Panther comics or anything, but I was like, cool, a black superhero, this should be good if it's in the right, hands. And then, Civil War came out, and he was awesome in that, although his accent was a little bit. But, mostly, his character's really good, the way they incorporated him into that story was really good, and then when they announced Ryan Coogler was directing it, that's when I really started to get excited.
Because you watched Creed.
Creed, and I loved Creed, yeah. And I haven't seen Fruitvale Station, but I've heard really good things about it.
Yeah, so when he was really young when he got that project too, so talent.
Yeah, he's not that old considering the kind of work he's done so far. He's a very impressive person. And if you listen to his, I remember listening to a couple of his interviews after he did Creed, and he was so, low-key, and, he's not full of himself. We have that, there's this director stereotype. How do I put this? The genius white man who just kind of, is a dictator on set, and everybody puts up with it because he's so smart. You just don't get that vibe from Ryan Coogler. He's so down to earth, and he's so collaborative. He's so awesome. So I was very excited to see what he would do.
Oh my god, yes. There was this, I told you in the last, the field podcast, that Vanity Fair did this video. It's on YouTube. I'll link it below.
For sure.
Where they invited Ryan Coogler to come and discuss a fight scene, and he chose the casino fight scene to explain. And his enthusiasm, it comes out in all interviews that he's done about Black Panther, but in that scene, you could see the nerdiness in him come out, and it's delightful. And we're going to talk more about that in a bit, but I wanted to I wanted to tell you what I thought when the Black Panther movie was first announced. I was not super excited because I was at least 60% sure that it was not going to be something I would enjoy. So till now, Marvel has had two important black characters. That would be War Machine and Falcon, right? Both secondary backups to important white male heroes. And both military men, men of, honor, dignity and all of that stuff. But there is this trope that Hollywood does where black men are either from the hood or they are military men who are, very upright and trustworthy and honorable and all of that. But it's those are the two stereotypes. So if
it's a guy from the hood that went to the military and
then got upright and honest. Yeah. Okay. So it's
very narrow.
So between Falcon and War Machine, I couldn't actually see, like, I know they're played by amazing actors, but what they did in Iron Man, they swapped out one black man for another between two movies. Like, I really liked Terrence Howard as James Rhodes Brody, and I was really disappointed when he was replaced. But the thing is, essentially, it didn't actually make much of a difference to the larger narrative. I just like that actor in particular, but really, I mean, what difference did it make? I suppose, yes, Rhodey had, as War Machine, he had a role to play, especially in the second movie, but like his is not the character that you take home and think about and have a discourse on. My point is that big Hollywood blockbusters have not done black characters justice historically. So
absolutely.
So keeping that in mind, I was not super excited about black. I love the idea, but I was bracing myself for disappointment. Okay, so that's what, and then my God, you saw T'Challa in Civil War, and he was amazing. That was so completely unexpected. I loved everything about the way they introduced him, the way they showed his character's motivation. They revealed so much about his character in a very short span of time. Like, he didn't have too many scenes in the movie, but the ones that were there were amazing. Like, those were the scenes that people went home and really talked about. Because after a long time, you had a black hero with so much agency. His actions were not dependent on his white heroic friends' decisions. Like, in Civil War, the two black men follow their two white friends. Like, I'm sorry, I'm repeatedly using black and white, but you know what I mean, right?
It's totally the optics of that.
Yeah, the optics of that. War Machine and Falcon follow their respective white heroic friends to both sides. It didn't feel like also, they had. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, and to your point, like, he, in that movie, he doesn't play the villain, but he's definitely an antagonist, and he has a lot of really great points, because these two guys are, like, on the opposite side of this philosophical debate, which eventually just becomes, like, more about their bromance and the betrayal of their bromance, and the one guy being chosen over the other guy, and, like, I thought you were my friend and all this, but, like, meanwhile, he's like, my dad just got killed.
Yeah.
And you two are, like, having this, like, stupid power trip, and he's like, I just want to get the person who killed my dad, and I don't care if you're friends with him or if whoever it is. He's like, he's very noble and he has a purpose and you can understand his motivation. He's, like, not there for these two dudes, like, BS.
Yeah.
So you can tell from that he's an impressive person, and it makes you excited to see what he's going to do in his own movie.
Totally. I mean, even aside from the action scene, that beautiful tunnel chase, even aside from that, I love that they had him, T'Challa, kind of make that decision whether or not to execute Zemo. That was so nicely done, and again, agency, that right there told you that this character was different from black heroes introduced in the Marvel pantheon until now. I'm just going to call them black because there are gods there. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, and that imagery of him leaving his claw marks against Captain America's shield, I was like, ooh, that's symbolism.
Powerful,
I like that.
Man. Yeah. That was so amazing. So, how did you feel right after watching the movie?
Oh my gosh, as soon as the ending credits came up, it has their names and those, like, stylized pictures, my eyes teared up. Like, I didn't cry for the whole thing because I was like, I need to watch every frame. I can't miss anything. But as soon as the ending credits came up, I was just, like, emotionally overcome. I was so moved. Like, I was like, what did I just watch? Like, this is amazing. I didn't believe that I would ever be able to see a movie like this. And we just did. Like, oh my God. So that was my initial reaction. And then I went home and I started thinking about, in the car on the way home, I started thinking about all I can't believe all the themes that this movie brings up that I was not expecting a Marvel movie to bring up. That was really what blew me away the most.
I know, and I love how much freedom was given to the writers of this movie. Like, you had Ryan Coogler and Joe Robert Cole bringing in ideas and conflicts that I don't even most mainstream movies are just not brave enough to bring out to the public. And yes, they are doing it in a sort of a parable form. It's not real, in so much as Wakanda is not a real place, but the conflicts are so immediate and so relevant to today, like right now. So it just, I could not, it was so unexpected, and it gave me chills.
Especially given that it's a Disney Marvel, that's like a conglomerate that's known for keeping really tight rein on the people it hires and its directors, and like they're kind of notorious for being extremely, not micromanaging, but they definitely have a very strong idea of like what kind of movies their company is going to make, and they're not willing to let people just run free, which is probably in some ways good to some extent, because it means the vision is very, like, the Marvel universe is very, you can tell it's been well thought out, well planned. It makes sense. The movies are different enough that you enjoy them, but they still kind of fit into this same thing. But like with this one, they just kind of, you can tell that they were like, okay, Ryan Coogler, do your thing. We trust you. And that's awesome. Like, you can see that on screen, and it's really thrilling to watch.
I found out that apparently when Marvel first announced their phase 1 slew of movies back when 2004-5, like very early on, they had already said that there would be a Black Panther movie. Okay, and so that was like really far back, and Mark Bailey was hired to write the script initially, and by the time T'Challa was introduced in Civil War, and they had like a lot of script changes, a lot of production changes, stuff happened, and then Cole and Coogler came in. So Cole is a alumnus of Marvel's writing workshop. Like, they have an in-house workshop, and then he met up with Coogler to write this script. And Coogler, as we know, loves Michael B. Jordan. So there is some speculation that if Boseman hadn't already been cast as Black Panther, maybe he would have liked to cast Jordan. But I honestly think that him casting Jordan as Killmonger was genius. Like, I can't imagine anybody else playing this character the way Jordan played it, and my God, was he memorable. It's been said repeatedly that he has to be one of the best Marvel, no, not one, the best Marvel villain.
Yeah, created. He's the best.
Totally, hands down.
Yeah, he's the best Marvel villain so far, and I don't think anyone's going to be able to usurp that title anytime soon. He was, I agree, brilliant in that role.
Right?
He would have been wasted as the Black Panther, in my opinion.
And also that Boseman brings a certain grace and, a quiet dignity to the role. And I'm sure Jordan would have had his own spin on it, but I just really like Boseman's interpretation of Black Panther, especially in this movie where he, despite being the namesake, he was not actually the focus of the movie. It was Wakanda, like this entire ensemble cast, and not just Boseman. But coming back to what I was saying, every character here has a lot of depth and many facets, which I love. But without the villain's root of conflict, I don't think the movie would have been what it is. So
like, if you think about what the root conflict of this movie is, basically you have this extremely privileged royal, heir to the throne that's always known that he's going to be king of this country that has never been colonized, is extremely independent, the most advanced nation in the world, and they're like kind of hidden and protected, so they don't really have to worry about being invaded or attacked by anyone for the most part. And then you have this, their abandoned nephew of the former king who grew up in really rough circumstances in a tough environment in America, where he's, as a black man in America, with everything that entails. And then you have them kind of clashing, and their philosophies clashing, and that kind of becomes such an amazing metaphor for like this whole conversation and that we're having right now, and that, that we've had to sort of it's like a conversation that in this country for sure, I'm sure in other places too, people have been having and struggling with for a long time. And it's amazing how they sort of bring those two perspectives together and then like everybody is, even though Killmonger, his way of going about trying to fix what he sees as wrong is very problematic, but what he sees as wrong is actually, it's true. Like his grievances against Wakanda are true. He's like, you know, all these people are suffering around the world, black people, but also just like regular people. And you guys are sitting here on your little mountain, all cozy, and you're super rich and you have all this technology and you just don't care. And you're just more worried about your own safety and your own protection. Like, it's true. It's kind of, and it's something that eventually has an impact on all the other characters in the movie, even though they don't come around to his exact philosophy, but they're all changed in some way. And especially T'Challa is really impacted, and he totally changes his whole ruling philosophy, which is really, it's great to see that, you know, it's not like two guys who fight to the death and the villain gets killed and then that's over. Now he's gone, you know, like he's out of our way now. We can just go back to our regular lives being heroes.
Yeah.
It's very different.
Okay, I remember the point that I was actually trying to make and then kind of digressed away. Coogler was handed this entirely pre-made world and all of that. That was amazing. They did so much research. But it seems to me that given how much Coogler loves Jordan, he put a lot of effort into making sure that this amazing villain isn't just a villain, but he is an anti-hero. Like, he's a tragic, heroic character. And someone pointed it out that Killmonger is, his entire journey is essentially a heroic journey. Like he has a tragic backstory, yes, but the way he emerges, like think of all the other superheroes in the world. I think somebody compared him to Batman about losing his parents at a very young age, having to sort of, you know, be alone and train himself for years and years and years under really difficult circumstances just to, with, you know, a goal of vengeance. Yeah, work towards it very diligently and then finally try to execute that plan. Now, again, I mean, the difference is that he did not care about casualties in the way of his plan. He was right. His motivation was right. The point he was trying to make is very true. And again, I'm quoting somebody else. I wish I could remember whom. When they say that villains don't think that they are villainous, Killmonger definitely doesn't think he's villainous because the point he's trying to make is very logical. He's not like Joker who's completely lost his mind because of a trauma.
Yeah.
He can explain, like if you have an argument with him, he's well educated, of course. He can argue the point, but he can argue the point and convince you that he is right. The only part where we as an audience can't support him is in his execution of, you know, the solution that he envisions. So
exactly.
Yeah, so he's an anti-hero, and man, I was hoping so hard that he wouldn't, spoiler, die in the end. That was so hard. Like till the last moment, I was like, even when he was stabbed, I was thinking, okay, now something will happen, and he's going to like switch sides, and they're going to be cousins against the world, and yeah, that didn't happen.
I would have liked to see that. I mean, I get his reasoning because it fits into his very kind of extreme, like all or nothing philosophy, but I kind of wish he had said yes when T'Challa was like, maybe we can still heal you, and he's like, no. I was like, why are you saying no? Dude, this is like the brother you could have had, you know.
Oh, God,
he wants to be your brother. Yeah.
In that, I love the way they framed that moment where he knew everything he had lost, the opportunity to know his motherland, his father's homeland. He had clearly grown up wishing to see Wakanda, wishing to experience Wakanda as his father had told him about the place, but he never could, and he never could be a part of it because he was just too far gone down along the path of anger and vengeance, and he just couldn't bring himself back. And his conviction was so deeply rooted at this point that he really did believe that his way was the only way to make things right in the world. So, yeah.
Yeah, and even if he had come around to understanding, even if he didn't agree with him, even if he sort of understood a little bit of what T'Challa was saying, like, he wasn't willing to compromise his journey, I guess. And, it's kind of this trope with villains that we get it a lot in Korean dramas, too. It's like, I've come too far down this path, I can't turn back now. And usually I'm just, like, rolling my eyes, like, dude, all you have to do is turn around and walk back the way you came, not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But with him, you can actually feel the weight of all the pain and all the stuff that he went through growing up and all the violence that he's gone, the training that he went through in the military and the Black Ops training and all of the people whose blood he has on his hands and literally whose, murdered lives he's marked into his body. Like, you can see why he would feel that he cannot change at this point and why he would be unwilling to do that. It's believable.
Literally scarred from that life.
Yeah, exactly. He's literally scarred for life. So, yeah, with him, it's actually, the motivations in this, for all the characters in this movie are just so incredibly fully realized. And just like the world is fully realized. Like, they spent so much time working on the details, and I really, really love that.
True. And it really shows in, from the moment these characters are introduced, so it's essentially a 3-act script, right? And I was sort of trying to figure out where the acts end, and I think the first act pretty much ends when T'Challa gets crowned as king. So, or at least until then. So, in that first act, I told you before that the first time I watched it, that first part kind of felt a bit slow to me. The second time, not at all. I was noticing so many other things, but I think the first part felt a bit slow to me. Simply, the first time it felt a bit slow to me. The first about, 30 minutes or so. Because even though there were action scenes happening, like T'Challa going and getting, what's her name? Nakia out of her mission, like extracting her out of her mission. Him going and having the fight at the was it the Warrior Falls, right? It's the Warrior Falls, and so a lot is happening. It just somehow the pacing seemed quieter, not slow, just quieter, and it was bewildering me. And then I realized that all Marvel movies before this, they had set up a certain expectation in my head about the pacing. It's usually a lot more snap and go. Like, you don't have time to breathe. Things are always happening. People are always changing one-liners. Stuff is always moving. Your brain is always being sort of like pummeled with different scenes and different information. Whereas here, they just let you soak in the world. And man, this world, it's just... I don't know how they did it, but in my head, Wakanda is a fully realized country, and I don't think we saw too many shots of the place. And yet, I can imagine how people would live there, like a everyday functioning life. I can imagine that. So, how completely amazing is that?
Yeah, well, because they needed to do that, right? Because we're not just in a slightly fictionalized version of New York or Washington, like we have been with a lot of the other, which is already a place that we have a reference for, even if we haven't lived there ourselves, but we've seen so many movies that and we've read so many books and comic books that it's a character already, it's a place that we know. And we can just jump into, and plus we've had so many movies, like this is the 18th Marvel movie, and the other 17 have all been set in the US for the most part. So with this, it really deserved, and it's such a different place. It's a place that doesn't exist in our real world, sadly, because there is no part of Africa that has been untouched by colonization. And yet here we have this country that's impossible and yet beautiful country.
You say that, but now at this point, I have been completely convinced that Wakanda could very well exist. And that's kind of the power of movies, right? Like, it's some corner of your mind, if they can just manage to convince you that this could exist, that's sometimes all you need. Like, it changes your perception about a place so completely. Think about the image of Africa that, most of the world has had till now, because of news channels always bombarding us with images of practically the poorest part of that continent, of showing us like the worst images of a country. That really seeps into your consciousness, right? So when you think Africa, you either think lion or you think a dictator, and somehow I guess everybody's living right between the two. It just, there doesn't seem to be anything else when think about that place. Now when you think about Africa, there's a fairly good chance that you're going to think of Wakanda first, and that's just so amazing.
Yeah, and even like beyond the fictional place that feels very real, like there is, in reality, like modern cities and a lot of resources and high education. Like there's all this stuff there that nobody ever talks about. Like the first university was started by a Black Muslim woman in Timbuktu in Africa. Like no one ever talks about that. And even like in the movie, there's one line where Michael B. Jordan says like all of humanity started on this continent, so all people are our people. Like he just throws that line out there, but like there's a lot of people who don't know that, and they aren't willing to think about the world like that. And it's those little lines that are very, it's a small revolution in a way, because it's upending all these things that we're normally sort of subliminally getting in movies about. That it's like this internalized kind of under the surface white supremacy in like every Hollywood movie that we've ever watched almost. Absolutely. Especially these big mainstream blockbusters.
True.
So that is, it's big. It's like it's a big thing that happens in a lot of small moments. Can we talk about Shuri? Speaking of colonizers, because she has some of the best lines. I was just thinking of that moment where like Martin Freeman wakes up and she's like, "Don't scare me like that, colonizer," which is another great moment. Which is just, I was like, "What is it? Is this a Disney Marvel movie? Like, what just happened?"
I know.
So great.
How did Disney and Marvel suddenly get this brave? That was so good. And look, it was gentle fun being poked at them, and that was, it's not like they made it palatable, like they made it sort of like milksop. They brought in humor to drive home truths that otherwise would have been really hard for people to accept. Like, look, no white person, no matter how sympathetic they are, would enjoy being called colonizer. Okay? Because nobody likes to be reminded of that part of history. But it's just the way Shuri does it. It's a joke, and it's a joke that's not mean-spirited. So, you kind of like, haha, that was funny, and then you move on because there's really nothing more to say there because it's the truth. So now you move on. The joke's done.
And you're right. Like, they did a really good job of, the movie is very entertaining and it's funny and it's really enjoyable to watch, but it also doesn't shy away from these truths or like water them down, like you're saying. It just kind of goes for it, and you're like, wow, they went there. And there's some kind of magic with this cast and this team and the way they've set up this world where like, I'm not a white person, but I'm not really too concerned about what other people felt about while watching this movie, because like the people who really needed to see this movie, like they loved it. And I feel like from the response I've seen online and from different people, like I think most people really enjoyed this movie.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. Like in order, like to be able to hit, all quadrants and every age group and every race background and like internationally, like all over the world, like it's been breaking records, not just here, but all over the world. Like that's amazing. That's awesome.
I can vouch for India. Like it's been 2 weeks now and theaters are still packed. Okay, in my city, it's hard to get a ticket. So it's big, I promise you. It's like huge. Even if you guys didn't look beyond your borders, it's big. Because it's not just about... It's amazing for the black community, and I'm so happy for them, but it's also so relevant to us, like South Asian kids.
For sure.
Because we've dealt with colonization and the effects, like my country has been independent for decades and decades, but it's still the post-colonial hangover is heavy, okay? And
for sure.
It's just, symbolism is so important to us. There's a reason why certain sections of my country holds so hard onto what our ancients did like 3,000 years ago, because it reminds us that we had value before we were colonized.
Yeah. No, but it's like what we were talking about before. It's a fantastical world, and it does what like the best of fantasy and science fiction does, right? It allows you to talk about something very real in a fictional setting and gives you more freedom, and hopefully will reach more people, maybe because they're surprised by the subject matter, and it allows you to talk freely about something like that. Whereas, yeah, like this whole thing, like as also, a grandchild of people who went through the partition of India, I felt that very strongly. It's like the simultaneous joy and sadness. When he sits on that throne, when Killmonger sits on that throne, and he says, "The sun will never set on the empire of Wakanda," and we're just like, yeah, that we've heard that before. Like who doesn't know that line of "the sun never sets on the British Empire"? Like it's so. And it pushes back against that narrative that all these countries that are so-called third world countries, which did you notice that the white guy, the CIA guy, he continuously refers to Wakanda as a third world country?
Yeah, I think
and like people don't really say that so much anymore. Yeah, but he's from that generation that used to use that terminology. And like there's this kind of narrative that, yeah, it was terrible what, European countries did to all these countries when they went and colonized them. But look, they couldn't have advanced to where they are now if it wasn't for us. So it's not all bad, like the British put in railroads and they provided like the parliamentary system of government. And so like in the end, like we did some bad stuff, but you guys aren't that badly off. We helped you. There's like this underlying, and I think some people even from our communities kind of buy into that, like, okay, yeah, they colonized us, but like I still want to go to England to get my degree from Oxford because that's always going to be better,
Yeah.
It's like you said, that colonial hangover. So how amazing to see a country that has not lost their own culture, that hasn't lost their own, their language and their art and their way of dressing, and yet have been able to take their own resources instead of having all their resources looted away and, stored in the British Museum or in the, Buckingham Palace, and have been able to create something amazing that other people want,
Sure.
And they're on the top. And yeah, like we don't have vibranium in real life, but like our countries have a lot of natural resources. We have a lot of human resources. We have a lot to be proud of in our history, and that was systematically stripped away and stolen and, destroyed, very consciously and deliberately. So it's a mixed feeling. It's watching it, but it's very powerful.
Here's the thing. I've grown up hearing about the Kohinoor diamond that was taken away. Some say sold, some say stolen away from this country. But essentially, yes, taken away from us. It's part of the Queen's jewels, like crown jewels.
Yeah.
So
crown jewels, yeah.
Now, my country has been asking for it back, like most countries whose, inheritance, like natural and historical inheritances have been taken away by the British or other European countries, have been asking for those things back, and then most of them not receiving them. So this one, for instance, has been a sort of like a sore subject for us for decades. And the thing is that it's just something you grow up knowing and with no real expectation of ever getting that diamond back. It just, you don't expect it. But that scene where Eric Killmonger walks into that museum and he's studying the Wakanda artifact, and
that was so good.
Oh my god! Look, the thing is, no, I do not support him killing those people and taking that away. It's not about that. It's about that moment when he's like up in her face and he's like, "Do you think your ancestors paid for these? Do you think they asked for permission?" Oh my god!
That line was just like, that was like, what, maybe 10 minutes into the movie? And I was like, oh, this movie is going to be something else. Like, I was like, just sitting up straight in my chair.
I don't know what guardian angel was looking over the crew of this movie. How on earth were they allowed to do these scenes? Because I keep saying allowed because look, if it hadn't been a matter of censorship, then how have these scenes not happened before? How has dialogue like this, conflict like this not been shown on the big screen before?
And for sure.
Right, so there had to be a certain amount of censorship happening in Hollywood, like self-censorship maybe, but it was there. So who was it? How was it that this script was conceived of and then passed and then produced without, meddling?
Yeah, and I just found out a few weeks ago that and I kind of had an idea about this, but I didn't know it was so explicit. Every movie that references or shows, I think every movie that shows the U.S. military, the script has to pass through their hands, and they have to approve it.
Oh yeah, I saw a YouTube video essay about that. Again, I will link it below.
For sure. And so, like, in this kind of environment where you basically we have like state propaganda coming out of Hollywood, it is very, like when he and I heard some like a podcast interview with somebody who was saying that like they had a really big problem with the CIA being like portrayed as a sympathetic character in this movie and being one of the heroes, even though, like if you look at the title of the movie, it's Black Panther, and if you look at what the CIA has done to that political party in the past and how some of those people are still locked up in jail now, like, I mean, it's a very deep topic. But he was like, why is this person? But I get that point, but at the same time, you have him there constantly being told, you're a colonizer, you can't
speak,
you can't speak, you don't get to have a voice, but then he ends up helping them, but he also tells them like, this guy came through our system, we're kind of part of the reason that he's so deadly, we taught him, and he says like the CIA, that's what they do, they go in and destabilize foreign countries when there's a transition of power. Yeah, I was like, oh my god, like he just basically told them all this stuff that we've always known, but like no one ever acknowledges this. Sure. Especially not on a big screen and a movie that's going to be watched by so many people. It's like one of those dirty secrets that people don't want to talk about. So, I feel like him saying that as a CIA agent gave that information more legitimacy and made it more believable to audiences, not necessarily to the other characters, than it would have been if it was just one of the Wakandan people who was like, that they do that, because people don't believe that stuff when we talk about it. They don't.
Yeah. Then it's a conspiracy theory.
Right, exactly. So I feel like it was important for him to have that background because it's like an insider telling the secrets. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good point, because as I said before in the straight podcast, unrecorded podcast, I couldn't actually see the point of this guy. What's his name? Martin Freeman. No, Everett Ross. Everett Ross. I couldn't see the point. Yeah, I couldn't see the point of Agent Ross being in this movie, aside from like a plot, like, okay, maybe sort of like a punchline for jokes and a plot device that gives them some information about Killmonger's past that they could not have had otherwise. So that was my immediate thing, but now that you put it this way, yes, I sort of understand what you're saying. They needed to have Agent Ross there to represent a group who have systematically, destroyed so many governments for, I'm assuming, patriotic purposes, but
yeah. Let's not go there. But it also, and also like, especially in this context, when it's a country that has been basically living like a hermit this whole time, it gives an extra punch to like why it's been so important to, like T'Challa's forefathers to be so impervious and so hidden from the outside world, because the reality is like, he's made the decision at the end of this movie to, open up the conversation and open up trade and stuff, but like, you think that these other governments are not going to suddenly come for this country now that they know what they actually hold in their possession? Like, that's just reality.
Yeah. I can't, because, and I can't, like, when after the credits rolled and I had a moment to like breathe, that kept bugging me, because now that T'Challa's opening up the borders, people are going to want to come in and see, look, this vibranium mound. Sooner or later they're going to send in spies. Look, these people, if they start taking in refugees, then they are going to also have to allow other people to come in. the secret is going to be out, people are going to try and exploit them, and can Wakanda protect themselves? Like Lupita Nyong'o's Nakia was so convinced that Wakanda is powerful and strong enough to protect themselves and protect others. Like, that's a quote from the movie. But is it, Wakanda never actually has had to protect itself from an outside invasion because they have been isolationists. It's kind of naive to believe that they would not immediately be sort of like, I don't know, surrounded by, I don't know, armies trying to move them.
Hyenas. Yeah.
Hyenas, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, I guess part of it is also that he has realized by the end of the movie that they're not going to be able to keep the outside world out anymore for much longer anyway, so it might as well be on their own terms, because in today's world, like, the way that technology has advanced and information has advanced, and like the ease with which people can travel all over the world and information can travel, like, it's not really realistic for them to stay hidden much longer, right? So they might as well start out strong, gather some allies, because they probably can't do it on their own, but if they have powerful allies, and if they, make the US one of their allies, which is, like an uncomfortable bedfellow, but they have a lot of power and they can give you that kind of backing if you do something for them in exchange. Like, it's not a perfect solution, but you have to, if you're going to live in the world,
start somewhere. Yeah,
right, exactly.
And you're right, like Wakabi points that out once Killmonger takes the throne, that in their very first meeting he points out that the world is getting smaller, and soon there's going to be the conqueror and the conquered, and I would rather be the former. He has a point there, like which brings me to Wakabi, a character that I didn't think that they gave too much screen time to. Daniel Kaluuya's Wakabi, yet they did such a good job of unveiling his motivation. Like, it's just a few scenes, and yeah, you knew so much about why he made the choices he did. Now, I am not completely convinced that 30 years ago he lost his parents, and yes, he was feeling betrayed by T'Challa's father, for not catching Claw. Yes, I get that, but was that enough to turn him against his best friend and essentially run off into the field to kill him? Not super convinced about that, but I can see how he would take Eric Killmonger's side when he came into their country and with a sort of a radically different political opinion that, he was suddenly in power to execute. So, wow, that was a long sentence. I hope it made some sense.
No, it made sense. And since we're speaking of the characters, let's talk about the women in this movie, because they were such a huge part of why I loved it. Oh my gosh.
Okay, man, I did not expect that. What? I realized Shuri was amazing. Shuri is amazing. Shuri is so amazing. But Okoye, I think I have like the biggest girl crush on her. My God, that woman. Yeah,
she's amazing. Yeah, I mean, well, what is it? What a beautiful thing, right? That we don't have to have one woman, and we can have like 4 or 5 awesome women that we don't have to choose between, because we get to have all of them like that.
Right, and they are so unique. Each of them have different personalities, different points of view, and they have points of view, like their own points of view. None of them are sort of arranging themselves behind their respective men and sort of following their, like, supporting their opinions. No, they have their own conflict and their own convictions. And how beautiful is it that the first time T'Challa's romantic interest Nakia was introduced, they immediately showed us that Nakia had her own mind, and that was why the relationship was not working right now, because T'Challa had to be the king and Nakia could not support his policies. She wanted to go out and help, and T'Challa, is a traditionalist until now, and he couldn't do that. So it's just, I love that. Like, right off the bat, you know that Nakia has her own mind. And
he respects that mind. Yeah, and he respects all the women in his life, and he's basically nothing without them. Like, if he didn't have Shuri's, I mean, yes, he's a very, upstanding and dignified person, but like, Shuri's the one that provides all of his tech, and, she's, like I said this in my review, but she's not the guy in the chair, but the girl in the driver's seat. Like, literally, she drives his escape vehicle. She gives him all these new toys. Yeah, and then like she roasts him at the same time. Like his mom is there. She's awesome. Like Nakia is there. You know, like he has all these women kind of. They support him, but they also keep him in check when he needs it.
Absolutely, and let's talk about Shuri for a second again. Shuri in the comics, from what I've seen, again, I've not read this extensively. I just right before Black Panther came out, I was sort of like looking through a few issues, and from what I could see, Shuri was mostly a very feminine, I think someone said temple-going character, and yes, that's exactly what she was in the comics from the few pages that I read. She was not this Shuri, and the what do you call it? The technological wizard in the family was T'Challa in the comics.
Yeah.
And here I love this. Like he comes in and he clearly designed his own suit. Remember, so he does have technological expertise, one assumes. But then he comes in and she's like, "This is your old suit, like functional, but you know, like old."
Right. Right.
that was so good.
As someone who has a much younger sister who constantly tells me that I'm old, I can very much relate to that.
Oh my god! It's just that entire scene in the lab when he is punching the new suit and the suit punches him back.
He's like, "Why are you videotaping?" She's like, "For research purposes." I'm like, "Oh, you know what's gonna happen."
Oh, that was delightful. So yeah, I loved what they did with Shuri's character, and also just essentially think about it. T'Challa could not have won the final battle scene without Shuri. Shuri was the one who was she was in the battlefield, literally fighting with her panther claws, or whatever they are called, those amazing things, and she was also telling Everett Ross what to do, how to sort of like control the plane that was shooting down those
the weapons. Carrying the weapons to other countries.
Yeah, the weapon carriers, and it just like she was basically masterminding the entire thing. That was like, imagine if she was not there, the T'Challa would have lost. Okay, is all I have to say about this.
He wouldn't have even been able to escape from Korea.
No, and like if he had fallen off that falls and M'Baku had taken him up to his lair and put him on ice, and then Nakia hadn't come with the purple bulb of life. What was it?
The heart-shaped herb. Yeah. But I like your name better. That's what I'm calling her from now on.
If she hadn't gone back and stolen that and come there, I think he would have just died. Yeah, would he have lived? No, he totally would not have lived. So it's again, as you said, without Okoye and Shuri and Nakia, he would not even have. And also, I guess Everett Ross, because he helped too, he would not have gotten out of South Korea. I love that this is supposedly his origin story, but it's actually Wakanda's origin story. Like Wakanda, as the modern world will now see it.
Yeah, and it also makes a really good comparison. In a sense, these two cousins are kind of mirrors of each other, right? That's one of the huge differences between them, is that T'Challa has been surrounded by all these people who have been supporting him and helping him, and kind of, you know, that he kind of talks to, and they give him their opinions, and they figure out what they want to do, and they're family, and he's alone, and he's been fighting alone his whole life. You know, Killmonger has been fighting alone and in a very hostile environment where he feels like he can't trust or rely on anyone. Like, you know, that scene where he eats the purple bulb of life, and then he sees his dad, and his dad's like, you know, I don't remember what his dad says, but he says like, everyone dies around here. He's a little boy again.
His dad says what? No tears for me, and the little boy is like, everyone dies around here, and the dad's like, look at what I've done. Like, neither of us can go back now. So.
But it's so like, that line just got me so in the heart, because it's true. He was abandoned by his uncle, and then he had to live his whole life not only being alone like a regular orphan would be in, you know, a low-income neighborhood in a society that's, you know, prejudiced against people who have your color of skin, but also having that image in his mind and knowing that there's a world out there that was better and where he would have been safe and, happy and taken care of and where he had a family, but that world rejected him. So of course he turned out to be so bitter and violent and angry and uncompromising,
See, I think you're still feeling layers of this character.
Oh yeah, this character is incredible. My cousin actually wrote this really good piece. He lives in Australia and he writes, but he wrote this piece about why Killmonger is actually the real hero of Black Panther.
Yeah.
We can link that too. It's quite interesting. It talks about a lot of this stuff too. So the music, how good was the music?
The music was so amazing. It's so refreshing to have music that sounds not like it's been done to death 100 times. I have friends who love music from Marvel and DC. They have the original soundtracks in their ears all the time. They're listening on repeat to these heroic themes, and that's great. But aside from Wonder Woman's theme song, in recent years, all of these themes more or less sound the same to me.
I agree. Yeah.
There was something amazing and memorable about the original Superman theme, for instance. But can anybody really remember what the Superman theme in the latest movies were? I mean, let's not talk about the movies themselves, but just the theme, because they had amazing composers working on these. So it's just that, and the same with Avengers, the sound is so
generic.
Generic.
Yeah, it's very generic.
Also, a really good YouTube video explaining why and sort of speculating. I will link. Moving on. Is it because they have moved to a different continent and they have a whole new world of music to take inspiration from? Is that why it's so different? Just the background scores, okay, not even the main themes.
Yes.
In the casino scene, for instance, when the camera focuses on Okoye and she is fighting off, I don't know, some 7 people with her spear.
With her spear. Yeah.
And there is this constant chuk 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 chuk. I don't even know what it's been saying. What they're saying, but Ryan Coogler in that Vanity Fair video explains that that's basically the Dora Milaje war cry of sorts. It's a thing. So so for her, it's a specific theme for her. So when the camera is focusing on her, that theme starts, and I got goosebumps. I didn't even know why I was getting goosebumps. I mean, she was amazing, the way she was moving and the way the camera was following her. But it just, every single time these tracks would start, I don't think I've ever felt like they are supposed to evoke emotion in you. And my God, did they evoke emotion in me here. It's right. Not just the plot, but the way they mix the music within these moments, within these scenes. I mean, they elevated scenes that otherwise would have been good, but not great.
Basic Marvel action sequence, right? With basic Marvel action sequence background music that it kind of serves its purpose to make the scene kind of move and go, but once it's over, you don't even remember the music. But with this, it's it gives this flavor and this feeling and this soundscape. And like you said, it's so specific to each character, because then you have when Killmonger does his Stalk of Doom, and he has that super cool hip hop kind of background. And he has his own music, and T'Challa has his own music, and they all have their own themes, and it depending on where you are, the music changes, and depending on it's just so good. It's so good, and it blends this this Pan-African sound with the the very Oakland kind of hip hop. Yeah. It's just so good. It's so good.
It adds so much to the world building. I had no idea. I knew about it theoretically, but this is the first time I'm watching music give dimensions to a physical world. And it was the waterfall sound, the warrior falls where they were having the fights. There was a very specific music being used over there. It just. And now these songs, wherever they play, I get those visions of those moments in my eyes, in front of my eyes, and it's a facet of the world, not just that scene. It's the feeling that I had when that scene was playing in front of my eyes. It's just
It's like that feeling you get from the Star Wars music, right?
Yes,
it's
exactly.
so specific to that movie, and it gives you these specific type of feelings, and you don't have to. I mean, that doesn't even have any words or vocals, but like this is in a very different kind of way, but it does that same thing of like it just brings you into that world as soon as you hear it. It's amazing.
Which brings me to the hero, I guess, of the other hero. Like the music is definitely hero of this movie, but the protagonist, which is Chadwick Boseman, we haven't actually spoken much about him, and the reason for that might actually be because it felt as if the writers and the director, they deliberately, like this, there was definitely an arc happening. T'Challa going from sort of a questioning but traditionalist view to someone who sees that maybe his ancestors were wrong and he has to be brave enough to take a new step in a new world. But while that transition, this particular transition isn't exactly a super complicated character arc, I think T'Challa would have reached that conclusion regardless of what happened in this movie, because he had Nakia arguing with him about this anyway, and as Wakawi pointed out, the world was getting smaller anyway. Sooner or later, he would have had to make this choice.
And also, like it's you can tell when he talks to Nakia that they've been having this conversation for a while, but he's so set in like the ways that he grew up with and things that his father told him, and like it takes that moment of understanding the betrayal that his father committed against his own family members and the lie that his father told in order to preserve that narrative of who they are as a people, that it kind of shocked him out of that complacency and made him really re-examine what he was doing. And then it was like it took that in order for all those arguments and all those other people's words to really penetrate him and for him to really reconsider what he was doing. And so like in a sense it was Wakanda's story, but it was also his own personal journey of like, what kind of a man do I want to be? Like, what kind of a king do I want to be,
So I know that theoretically that is where the script was going, but here is one place where I actually had an issue with the script. T'Challa's change happened for me too quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved it if he had actually on his own physically gone and seen what black men and women suffer in other countries or even in other parts of Africa, the kind of pain that because he seemed to be very removed from it. While Nakia was in the thick of things, while Eric had grown up in that world, he had always, he was a prince. And he had been brought up like a prince, so he was very far removed from actual suffering. He knew about it theoretically. So I would have loved for him to actually sort of get a real glimpse of that and not just feel bad for his cousin who was abandoned by his father and feel betrayed by his lie. Because when he's shouting at his ancestors that you were wrong, you were all wrong, why? Why does he think that they were all wrong? It was because they had kept Wakanda isolated that they were where they were. So clearly they were not wrong. And yes, what his father did was horrible. But again, it was to protect the country and their way of life. So it wasn't wrong. Why does he think that they were wrong? I was just not convinced how he went from traditionalist, someone who was defending his father's point of view, who had probably defended his ancestors' point of view, to Nakia for ages. And Nakia seems the kind of person who would have argued and debated every aspect of this. So this was an argument he was utterly familiar with. Why did he suddenly think that they were wrong? I was not convinced. Because he was never shown to have actually seen the suffering that he suddenly seemed to feel empathy for.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's a legitimate. I guess it was one of those things that instead of showing, they kind of told us. So it was not as well done as everything else. Yeah.
Which is kind of why I think because they were giving so much screen time, and so much opportunity for development to all the other characters, that I think Black Panther, like T'Challa himself, suffered a bit because of it. Like, relatively think about it. Which are the characters you think you spend most time with while watching the movie, T'Challa actually wasn't the one who comes out ahead when you think of simple runtime, like each character given a certain number of scenes.
Yeah, it was more of an ensemble cast more than him
Yeah,
being
right?
the hero. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so his storyline, I think, got a little, what do you guys call it?
Shortchanged?
Yeah, shortchanged. And and on the one hand, I actually don't mind that, because I think this movie really needed to establish the other characters, because we've already seen the amazingness of Black Panther in Civil War. Nobody's going to forget that intro.
Mm-hmm.
And he is clearly going to be a major part of Marvel going forward. So
Right.
there's going to be a lot of T'Challa. But so I have no complaints about the way they handled T'Challa. It's just a storyline here. It's just that if you were going to tell me that this was the arc that his character was going to go through, I am not convinced that he landed on the other side of the rainbow.
Right.
Yet a changed man for the right reasons.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, for me, it was enough, but I can see why it wouldn't feel like we saw everything that we needed to see. If we're talking about issues with the movie, I have a couple, even though on the whole I really loved it. One thing was, there's that scene where he goes to rescue Nakia from Nigeria, where I'm guessing there's some kind of like Muslim terrorist group that have kidnapped all these women because they're all wearing like these big, headscarf things on top of them. And like, I don't have a problem with her being part of this rescue mission, because like obviously stuff like this is happening, and like women are being treated badly. But I was a little bit, I didn't love the way where like he drops in, and then when they are fighting, she like rips off her scarf, and then all the other women also like they take off their like overgarments, and so it's really like playing into that narrative of like, Muslim women need to be liberated from their hijabs apparently, and it's like a symbol of physical and actual freedom. It was a really small moment, and I wasn't like super bothered by it, but it was just kind of those. I was just like, really. Do we need that? Especially considering how concerned this movie is about the American Black struggle. Exactly, details, and how concerned this movie is not just with Africa, but about the African American struggle. And like, there have been some very important, very heroic, Black Muslims that have been very, integral to the civil rights movement, and they didn't really talk about that. So, if you're going to portray that but not acknowledge the other, that just, like in a movie that was so good with representation on the whole, that just bothered me a little bit. And the second thing that kind of, I wasn't mad that it was there, because I can appreciate like a complicated setup and a complicated hero, but the fact that T'Challa is the king, and that this society that in other ways is so exemplary is actually a monarchy where, even though, people from other royal families get to challenge the new king when he is crowned, but ultimately still you're being ruled by a hereditary monarchy that's passed down through, quote unquote royal blood. And even though they're so concerned about having like justice and the rising up of oppressed people and, like being a good ruler and all that, like no one really talks about the fact that it's still a monarchy. And when Killmonger comes onto the throne, he comes legitimately. So obviously there's some kind of a flaw in their system. But like his struggle is not to fix the system, I guess. It's to get the right king back on the throne. So I don't have a problem with their monarchy being set up that way, because obviously like that's just the way that their country ended up being governed, and we don't need this country to be perfect, because no country is perfect. But I would have liked, just one line from one character just acknowledging that fact, and we didn't get that.
Which now that you have pointed this out, it occurs to me that for a film that is so clearly against oppression,
right?
The way they have set up the winning of the throne, T'Challa has clearly been trained as a warrior and trained as a prince, as an administrator from a very young age. Like, he was already Black Panther when his father was alive. He was clearly being given that herb because he had the power of the Black Panther, and he already had the suit that he had made himself, and that was when his father was alive. So he was clearly already, he had the mantle of the Black Panther even before he became king. So everybody already expected him to become the king. That's why he had come back, right?
Yeah.
My point is that whole thing about any other tribe sort of challenging him and taking the throne from him, that seemed more of a charade, because it's not, I mean, think about it. This guy has been trained for the position. So if it does happen, if somebody else does come around and challenge, like M'Baku did, for instance, everybody was super shocked, because I suppose traditionally it's polite not to challenge the
right, exactly.
king to
it
be
was
or
clearly
something.
a ritual. No one expected him to actually show up going, which is awesome, by the way. But yeah.
So that is just that was clearly something nobody was expecting. But M'Baku did come, and imagine if M'Baku had won. This guy would have had no training in running a monarchy. At least Killmonger, he's had some training where he knows how governments function, at least how to destroy them, which is what he ended up doing. But trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, M'Baku is clearly, he is the leader of his own people, so
yes,
he does know how to, but it's a very different type of society.
It's not just that it's a different type of society. Like, think about the way, like, senators in your country, they are clearly powerful people who know how to run a state, I'm assuming, and then they run for president. So does that necessarily mean that they already have the qualifications to be a president? There are so many other states, such a different set of jobs. I don't know how your country works, but
I think that would be more analogous to a governor, and a lot of former governors have gone on to be president. So
right. But so governors, replace that analogy with governors. So yeah,
I get your point. Yeah.
It's just that there was a clear disbalance in the power here. The royal family is clearly privileged. T'Challa is clearly a very privileged prince whose upbringing sort of like already gave him an edge over everybody else. And isn't that what we talk about when we talk about discrimination, where one person has an edge over the other person, and then you bring them out into the field to battle, and you say that, hey, this is fair play, this is sort of equal grounds. But it's not equal grounds. One person has been trained since childhood, and the other person has not. It's clearly not an equal ground. So,
and even if M'Baku had won and become the king, like, he also comes from a royal family in his own tribe. Like, the only other people who were given a chance to challenge him were also, specifically, explicitly of royal blood. So, like, a regular sheep herder is never going to get a chance to challenge the king to do battle, to become the king. Like, that's not going to happen.
Precisely. And the one other thing that a friend of mine pointed out, and I don't know, while I was watching the movie, it didn't occur to me. It was so amazing to see this elite force of women supporting the king, the Dora Milaje. It was amazing. But that's the only place where women warriors were. Like, the other forces that we saw, like, for instance, M'Baku's men who had come out, they were all men. Think about Wakabi's border patrol, they were all men. So clearly it's not a society where, women, like, these are different tribes, mind you. Okoye's Dora Milaje is her elite group, and in and of itself, it's a tribe. And you have Wakabi's border patrol, where there are women, but the women are more sort of minding the earth. The men are the warriors.
Yeah. I feel like I saw in the end when M'Baku brings his troops, like, I feel like I saw some women among those men as well. I feel like they were actually mixed. Yeah, I don't know.
Did you?
I don't have a clear memory, but I feel like I saw at least one woman. So I'm not sure. I will have to watch it again and
but
check
again,
that. But yeah, I understand what you mean. Yeah, but
it's like, I'm saying that, of course, it's a flawed society. As you said, it doesn't have to be a perfect world, and also it doesn't even have to be a bulletproof world building. It just has to be convincing, which it totally was.
Yeah.
One of the things you have in the comic that I was reading about is that, like, especially in the recent issues, Black Panther and the other relevant, the main protagonists of this world, they are trying to change Wakanda from a traditionalist society where certain sections are never given opportunity to one where, you know, the stage is a little more equal for everyone. So,
sure.
you know, it's a work in progress, but that's what you love. You don't want a perfect, brilliant paradise island. You want a work in progress, but
that's grounded in reality. And I feel like there was a nod to that when M'Baku comes to challenge T'Challa, and he's like, "You've given over the technological development to this young girl who has no respect for tradition." So obviously Shuri is kind of representing that new young generation who's like, yeah, you know, there could be better ways to do things that you old people don't think about. You should listen to me. And she's like, you know, she's the smartest person in the Marvel universe. So, you know, they listen to what she has to say.
And how much are you looking forward to her meeting Tony Stark?
I cannot wait. Yes, she
that
is going to do.
Please.
Yes, he's going to get the smackdown of his life, and I'm so here for it. So shall we just wrap up with some final thoughts then?
Yes. My final thoughts are just, I have so many feelings about this movie. I actually thought that recording it a second time, I would not be able to sort of, you know, feel the same amount of enthusiasm, but pretty much from the moment we started talking, it just, I still get goosebumps when I think of certain scenes from that movie. So clearly this is going to be living in my heart for a long time.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And it was so beautiful to watch. It was more than just a movie for me. I was very moved, and I was very touched, and I was very hopeful. I was talking to a couple of other people on Twitter, and like, I never imagined that I would see this kind of movie, especially not as like a Hollywood blockbuster with this much money and this much, you know, money put into promotion and this kind of budget and this kind of world building with this kind of cast. Like, I didn't think that was possible. And now that I've seen that that's possible, like, I have hope that, you know, we might get a Kamala Khan movie in my lifetime, which I didn't think would be possible.
Oh my god, I would love that.
Before I died, yeah. That would be amazing. You know, and before I was like, that's never gonna happen. But I mean, I never thought this would happen either. So there's hope, for sure. I'm excited to see what's gonna come next.
Now that they have given us this, they would better give us a lot more of this.
Yes. Anything else except Wakanda forever?
No. Wakanda forever, and wrap.
Alright, bye guys.
Hey there, Anisa again. We hope you enjoyed our discussion of Black Panther, which we're clearly not alone in loving, because this movie is a phenomenon that is still breaking records over a month after its release. You can find links to the articles and videos we referenced in the show notes in the episode description. We'd love to hear your thoughts, listeners, about the movie and about the podcast. As always, you can follow us on Twitter at the K-Drama Podcast or email us at starsinOurPocket@gmail.com. Please subscribe to Stars in My Pocket on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And I'd like to give a very special shout out to Rin Listened, our first ever reviewer on iTunes. Thank you so much for your kind words, Rin Listened. You made our month. Thanks again for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Annyeong!